On just about every company's financial report, there's this one number, and it can hide a company's biggest secrets. It's a number that's so large, yet so compressed, that understanding it is kind of like cracking a code. So today, that's exactly what we're going to do.
All right, let's get right into it. Think about any company that actually makes stuff. For them, this number we're talking about, it's their single biggest expense. We're talking millions, sometimes billions of dollars, all packed into one line. It just sits there, kind of like a black box, full of all these assumptions and complexities.
So, just how big are we talking? Well, for a ton of manufacturers, this number right here, that's the slice of their entire cost structure we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's right. Up to 85% of every single dollar a company spends can be locked inside this one number. And that makes it, well, incredibly important, right? But it also makes it a prime target for mistakes or even outright manipulation. So that leads to the big question, doesn't it? If this thing is so massive, what exactly is the cost of goods sold?
Okay, so on the surface, the definition seems really simple. It's the cost of goods sold, literally what it costs the company to produce the things that it sold. Sounds easy enough, right?
Well, not so fast. That simple definition, it's hiding a ton of complexity. The whole journey of how that final number gets built is, frankly, a maze. And that's exactly why auditors see it as such a high-risk area, a place where things can go wrong, really wrong.
So how do the experts, the auditors, cut through all that complexity? How do they actually verify that number is legit? Well, they have to follow the cost journey. They have to trace the money step by step through the entire process.
And there's a name for this technique. It's called the COGS Movement. The best way to think about it is like a tool for financial detectives. It's basically a map that lets you trace how every single dollar moves through a company, from a pile of raw materials all the way to a finished product getting sold.
And that whole journey, it breaks down into these four main stages. First, you've got your raw materials. Then, as you start working on them, they become work in process. Once they're all done, they're finished goods. And then, and only then, when they're sold, do they finally become the cost of goods sold. Okay, so let's make this a little more concrete. We're going to follow the life of a single product's cost, right from the very beginning.
So it all starts with buying the raw materials. But the moment those materials hit the factory floor, the clock starts ticking and costs start piling up. You've got direct labor. That's the wages for the folks actually putting the product together. And then you get the really tricky part, overhead. This is a slice of all the factory's general expenses. We're talking rent, electricity, the cost of keeping the machines running. All of that gets bundled into the product's value. But here's the key. None of it actually becomes COGS on the books until that one final moment, the instant the product is sold. And this chart really breaks it down for you. You can see how that final cost gets built. It's so much more than just the raw materials, the wood and screws. It's also the wages of the person who built it. And it's that slice of all the other factory costs, the rent, the lights, even the wear and tear on the machines. It all gets soaked up right into the final cost of that one product. Okay, so the company adds all this stuff up to get that final COGS number. But how do we know they did it correctly? Well, this is where the auditors come in with their magnifying glass. And they really do act like detectives here. They're not just going to take the company's word for it and accept that final number. No way. They go all the way back through that entire cost journey we just mapped out, and they test the evidence at every single step. They're making sure the story the company is telling with its numbers is actually true. And this quote right here, it points to one of the hardest parts of the whole investigation. See, figuring out how much of the factory's rent should be assigned to one single product, that's not an exact science. It involves making estimates, and whenever you have estimates, you have risk. A company that wants to, say, make its profits look better could decide to spread its overhead costs over more products than it really should, and just like that, each product looks cheaper to make and profits look bigger. So how do they prove it? How do they connect the process to the proof? This table shows you exactly how. For raw materials, they're not just looking at a number. They're checking supplier invoices and the receiving reports from the warehouse. For direct labor, they're pulling up employee timesheets and payroll records. And for that really tricky overhead, they're testing the company's logic, the allocation basis. How did they decide to spread those costs? Was it based on how many hours the machines ran or how many hours people worked? Does it actually make sense? The bottom line is every piece of that final cost has to be backed up by cold, hard evidence.
Okay, I know, we've been getting pretty deep into the accounting weeds here. But why should any of this matter to you if you're not an accountant or an auditor?
Because there's this massive gap between what most of us see and what's really going on behind the scenes. You see one number on a report, COGS, $50 million. But someone who understands the COGS movement, they see the whole story, the entire flow from raw parts to a sold product. They see the reality, not just the summary.
And at the end of the day, a COGS number that you can actually trust does so much more than just fill a space on a form. It tells you what a company's real profitability is. It's like a report card on how well they're running their production lines. It's a huge signal of the company's operational health. It builds trust with investors, and, it often helps the company itself get a much clearer picture of its own business. So this is the thought I really want to leave you with. A company's biggest cost, it's telling a story. A story about its health, its efficiency, and maybe even its honesty. The real question you have to ask is, after seeing everything that goes into that one number, do you trust the story it's telling?